Hello again, everyone. Welcome to a special Sunday edition of the Prestige Junkie podcast. Today, I'm excited to share the second interview I got to conduct in person at Netflix's headquarters, this time catching up with Black Mirror creator Charlie Brooker and the star of one of the new season's standout episodes, Eulogy, that would be Paul Giamatti. Charlie and Paul were already deep in conversation when I walked into the studio, and as you'll hear, they have a really excellent, curious dynamic together. Even if you didn't know that Paul hosts his own podcast, Chinwag, which is about a huge range of subjects, you can figure out by listening to this conversation that he's the kind of guy who wants to learn about basically everything. And Charlie Brooker, as you can tell just by watching Black Mirror, is really right there with him. Together, we talked about the making of Eulogy, in which Giamatti plays a man who is asked by an AI robot to conjure memories of his recently deceased ex-girlfriend and discovers some surprising truths about himself and his past in the process. We talked about the real-world use of AI, naturally, but also the ways that Black Mirror has been able to embrace technology and even how they conjured early 90s New York for the show. If you're listening on Spotify or want to look at the Anglers YouTube channel, you can watch the video of this conversation as well. Or just stick around to hear more from Paul Giamatti and Charlie Brooker on Black Mirror. So just to start with you guys, the origin story that I understand is that this was a script that you had written for a British actor, and then it somehow made it to Paul anyway.
It was written for an Englishman, and they couldn't get one, so they had to go to an American. Exactly.
I think to start, you see what happened. Let me.
Okay.
To start, so myself and Ella Rhodes, I met with her, and we were talking about what interests us from a sort of Black Mirror perspective, and we started talking about memory, and that led us to talk about photography and music and things like that. And then you quite quickly get into an almost therapeutic conversation about sort of regrets you've had or like relationships. And then we sort of thought, well, let's make this. We always knew there was going to be a transatlantic aspect. This was a guy who gets a phone call from overseas and is told that his ex, the great lost love of his life, has now died. And then we were talking about, well, who is this guy? And it's like Paul has been a hero of mine, but it's awkward that I have to say hero.
Inspirational
I'll go
hero?
further. I will call you an icon, sir.
Oh, wow, well, that's a whole other level.
Icon,
Thank you.
Iconic
Beautiful.
hero.
Understood. Very good.
Because we also knew, well, it's basically two speaking parts in this. You hear from Carol later, but you just hear a letter. But really, it's two speaking parts, and one of those speaking parts you don't even see for a lot of the piece. And so we're like, well, who's a really good actor? And for some reason, your name came up. After a long conversation,
you must have had to be flipping through the phone book.
I don't know.
This guy, we'll never get that guy. How about him? Yes. I know how it is.
So it was just it was a thrill to actually get you in a Black Mirror.
It was a thrill to be in. It was a humongous thrill for me.
Yeah, well, you've said you've been a fan of the show and Charlie's work before that.
Indeed,
but when this comes to you, were you looking for something specific? Do you ever have I want to do something that lasts for whatever, not the length of a feature film, but of an episode of a show? Like, was there a hole that this fit for you other than just loving Black Mirror?
Well, no, I mean, I think the Black Mirror is a kind of thing that's going to last a long time. So, I mean, that is it's one for the ages. That's a nice thing if you can get that. But I like science fiction a lot, which I don't know if you call this science fiction. You call it?
It is sci-fi, but it's, I guess, speculative fiction, I guess you
That's
call
good.
it.
Yeah.
Or like...
well, just, take the real world and add one little thing that feels just plausible enough that we can imagine
And the technological aspect of it seems to be a general theme throughout it.
It is. It's very... And it's also very Twilight Zone-y.
Yes.
So it's very Twilight Zone-y in that there's a MacGuffin, that there's and whereas they would have used the supernatural and we use... As a magical technology often,
that's
because
right.
you could play this out. This story
could
work.
Been just
it could
a kind of fantastical.
Or something.
She's an angel or something.
Sure.
Yes, you could have done an It's a Wonderful Life thing. I mean, it is in some ways kind of an It's a Wonderful Life thing.
Well, you know
That's
what
true.
we discussed. You know why she's called Carol? Because we discussed a Christmas
Carol. And it never even occurred to me.
Because it's the ghost of.
That did strike me.
Yeah.
I mean, something that was really cool about it was I was like, I thought it's science fiction, it's all these things, but I thought it's kind of a ghost story in a cool way. And like Christmas Carol or something, he's almost goes back to haunt his own life, and he's haunted by his own life. That was cool to me too.
Yeah.
And I thought, and I don't get to do I don't get a lot of science fiction or ghost stories sent to me. The kind of stuff I really like.
Yeah.
I don't get a lot of it. And so the idea that I could do this particular science fiction stuff, Black Mirror, was very exciting to me.
So when do you guys talk? What are the conversations that two of you have? You're working with different directors on the set, so what do you guys have to establish together to make this?
The first conversation we had was on Zoom, I believe.
Yes, it was.
And it was like Chris and Luke, the directors as well, who did an amazing job, who hadn't done narrative
this kind
things
of
before.
long-form narrative thing. They'd never really done it before. They were amazing.
Yeah.
They'd done adverts, music videos, promo, stuff like that, and so they had come in and they'd...
Real visual wizard kind of guys.
We'll get there.
They totally... And so we did a Zoom.
Yes, we did.
And I
all of
remember
us.
you were exactly what I wanted you to be. Like, you seemed exactly how
He's a wreck.
You even did. So sometimes I'll have one humorous comment I can make to an actor where near the end of the Zoom, I'll go, so don't fuck it up.
Yes.
But you said it. You said it.
I'm not going to fuck this up.
No, you said I might fuck this up.
Oh, yes, I did. That's right. You're right. I did.
Before I could, and I
said,
thought,
forgive me if I fuck this up.
That's obviously a meeting of minds.
I just feel I always need to present with that first.
Yeah.
Just don't fire. I want to warn you that there's an excellent chance I'm going to fuck this up. And so, but yes, so we covered all of that. We covered all of that. We had a wonderful, nice meeting, and you were very generous and said, if there's things in here you feel like you want to change, and there's things, and that doesn't happen a whole lot. And I find that happens generally with the really superior writers. Are generally say to me, fix this thing if you can. And I always go, what, are you out of your mind? I don't need to do anything. But it's always the invitation from guys like Charlie. It's interesting to me that they always say to me, help me out here. Tell me what to fix something if you think
ultimately,
so.
it makes me look better.
I know, but I'm
generous.
But I was sitting there going, you understand, I don't need to change a thing in this. It's like, this is perfect. It's really, really pretty perfect.
But then when we're actually shooting, I'm not always on set. I tend to melt away. I don't like to get between the director and the actors, because I feel that's without being poncy about it, it's a sacred space. It's a sort of, do you know what I mean?
But that's lovely. And that's also not always the case, I can tell you. That it's like somebody's going to be anxious in there and trying to, but you were very trusting of everything, Well,
also you were really good, so it wasn't like I had to sort of go, what the hell?
What is that guy doing? He's fucking it up. No, but I mean, it's a thing when you step into something that has such a strong aesthetic. I mean, it's such a strong imaginative world with it's so wide-ranging, but you just feel comfortable the second you step into it and you know, oh yeah, this is going to be fine, because everybody knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Everybody's on the same page. And
well, it's weird, isn't it? Because it's a small cast. Well, it's a small speaking cast, but also there were lots of people constantly around you.
Yes.
Surrounded
by people all the time.
Standing still.
Frighteningly still.
Well, I think you've said that even before you started shooting, you did like a rehearsal of just walking through this room full of frozen people, which sounds very spooky.
It was very spooky.
Yeah.
It was surprisingly spooky. Both Patsy and I, Patsy Ferran, who plays the AI, who was tremendous, we were weirded out by it. I didn't expect to be find it as eerie as I did. These people were extraordinary. I mean, I think a lot of them, they were dancers and mimes, I think. So it was like their ability to be expressive. But the two actors who play Carol and myself, Declan and Hazel, they were amazing too. I mean, to express so much frozen like that, just an expression and body, that's hard.
Yeah, that line she has about the younger you, being like, look at the look on your face. You can tell.
And you can really see it in his face.
It's amazing.
No, he was really good. And that, to find those people to be able to do that, that was extraordinary.
Yeah.
To find a guy who looks like me and he was a really good actor holding completely still all the time, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It was, because I think a lot of people assumed, I mean, there are obviously a lot of VFX in that episode because there's like things going on. But there's very little having to sort of stop it. There's occasionally somebody in the background would blink.
Oh, is that true?
You have to as a human. And so you can occasionally sort of paint that out, but very, very little of that. And also, I mean, there was just very clever design with things that looked like they were, curtains blowing that are frozen.
True. And smoke coming out of a bong.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
But it sounds like that was, from the beginning, it was said, we're going to do this as practical as we can. That was important for, I guess, philosophically for what it is, right?
In a way, you're right.
Yeah.
No, it's true. To have the actual people present there, to have the tactile world around you, made some sort of difference to it, I think.
That's reminded me that actually, again, in the original in the original sort of when we wrote an outline for the story, it wasn't frozen at all. Like everything was moving around constantly. And the original idea was that he was like watching scenes from his own life. So it was a lot more Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
And there was this idea that he watches an argument that he had and he sees that he was drunk it was a bit like you go back and you witness a sort of drunk argument you've had like years later and you're like, oh my God.
That's kind of like the Rashomon way to do it, right? Where you see it from different perspectives.
Yeah, but then I think
would he be remembering it? Is it still just his memory?
This
or
was
is he
also the thing.
The actual reality of it is always a question.
Well, and it felt so Christmas Carol to do it like that. At one point, I think I just thought, no, let's simplify it. Often with Black Mirror, it's like you want to simplify it and simplify it and simplify it. And there was the minute that actually made it, oh no, everything's frozen, and also we'll lean into the fact that here the first photo you go into, there's only one side of it. There's the only information of one sort of. That's going to be a cool visual. And it's eerie. It's a little like a ghost story, like you were saying.
And it enhances the idea that as I get more accustomed to doing it, my memories begin to fill it out, which is really kind of cool too.
Yeah.
And it also meant that's where the he can't remember her face thing came from.
And how much of it is him actually remembering the actual details or not. But then finally in the end, to some extent, I guess he's seeing her for real finally.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like it taps into this thing that's really relatable yearning. Like you look at a picture like, oh, if I could just see around the corner, I could see what this thing was. I'm trying to remember that. Like that's so much of Black Mirror, right? Is you take something that's like a very understunderstandable human impulse and you just go a little bit further with it. And it's like we all feel ourselves being pulled into it in the same way. Like I assume you read that and that's one of the things you connect with. That like who hasn't looked at a photo and wanted to jump right back into it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
So how did you guys get the early 90s with the, transferring from Manchester to New York, I guess, right? Like the early 90s like culture aspect. Was that your input? Was that coming from other places?
It's never specified that it's New York, is it? It's never said it's New York, but it clearly is New York.
He says something about where the coupe is. He says it's in Brooklyn, does he say that?
Oh, I think maybe you're right. Maybe he does.
Again, that's not really a world I know. We had a production design. We had a big book of photos from there. There was some big book of sort of really cool photos of people in the early 90s in New York looking much cooler than people in Britain were in interesting T-shirts and with better weather.
Yes.
And probably better tea.
I can tell you that first set, the rooftop barbecue thing, was eerily like the roof of a building I lived in down on the Bowery in Great Jones Street and then that area of Manhattan before it got massively gentrified.
Sure.
It was eerily spot on. Yeah. It was really like, because the guy's my age. And so looking back at it, I was like, this is crazy how accurate this is.
It was a world that felt familiar
They did
to
it
you.
Beautifully. Oh, crazy how accurate.
So we know it's New York, but why Cape Cod? Like, why of all the places that this guy could live was it Cape Cod?
Why? I think that was because we wanted to place him we knew we wanted him to be somewhat isolated, and we placed him somewhere. And also, it's like we filmed this in Britain. The whole thing was filmed in the UK. So we filmed that. We knew we could go down to the coast, and we thought we'll go down to the coast. Well, where could this be? Where in America could this be? Our other EP on this show, Jessica Rhodes, she's American, so we sort of said, where's and so that's why. So there wasn't a deeper meaning there, or some sort of strength of knowledge.
I will say, for Americans, it's a place that seems very kind of idyllic and sort of like a nice, lovely place. Ooh, who wouldn't kind of want to isolate themselves out on Cape Cod?
And it's the first holiday they go on together.
Yes, it's the first holiday, and it's got, as an American, it's a place that's very evocative.
Yeah.
Really works for you.
You can see the appeal being like, oh, I'll go garden on Cape Cod and I'll be happy, but...
Well, he's living in his parents' house.
Yes,
he's living in his parents' house.
Yeah.
But also he doesn't have such a bad life, which I also thought was good.
Yeah.
He's not living in some miserable hovel somewhere. I mean, he's surrounded by all the bric-a-brac of his sort of pre-digital life and stuff like that, and he's living in this frozen place, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
Which I liked about it too, is that he's living in a nice place.
When you also don't want him punished. Like he's going back and he's realizing the mistakes he's made, but it's like having a catharsis feels earned. Like it's a really interesting fine line of like he was a real jerk, he kind of missed some clear signs, but doesn't deserve,
he's done a lot of this to himself. I mean, he's sort of the architect of his own downfall in many ways, but it's interesting that from a Black Mirror perspective, we're not revealing that he's a murderer or something. I mean, it's not, because quite often in Black Mirror, where it's like suddenly, this person you've been rooting for is a terrible,
I was waiting when I read it for the first time. I kept waiting for the horrible moment, and then thought, oh my God, it doesn't have one of those moments.
I get one of the nicer ones.
Yes, I was like, oh, this is actually quite sweet.
Well, and it's almost the reverse, because he discovers that she wasn't this horrible person.
He discovers she wasn't this horrible person.
He kind of had to tell himself she was.
Yes, that's right.
And so it's kind of the reverse, I guess, of what we quite sometimes do in the show.
Yeah. Well, when you're making a season, do you feel like you need that balance? Do you need to have the episode or two that gives you the little bit of hope for humanity amid the darker
the
stuff?
bleakness? Yes, it's a strange show to do, because obviously each episode is so different and it's quite hermetically sealed. So you didn't really get to interact with anyone from other. We keep all the.
Yeah.
That's really cool,
we keep everything apart.
And I don't know what the other ones are, and nothing about it, which is really cool.
Oh, interesting. You have no idea what the other episodes are about at all.
They were doing.
No, when thinking of the season overall, I usually don't have all of them when we go. Like, it's quite. What I know is it's an odd show to do, because you know that as time has gone on, when we first started doing Black Mirror, every episode was like a sort of angry punk single, and do you know what I mean? It's like British nasty and the Prime Minister and a pig, and it's like it's horrible, nasty, it's horrible. And then when we went to Netflix, and I knew we were like, because we only did seasons of 3 episodes in the UK, and I thought, well, I've got to broaden what this is a bit, or I'll go mad. The first one I wrote was this episode, San Junipero, that's a really positive, like the most, because I thought I'll write the most positive one I can that'll blow the cobwebs out in it. Yeah. But it went down very well. What it means. It's a bit like being in a band where you do punk singles and you do big love ballads.
Right,
And so the audience is sometimes, you get some people who only like one of those flavours, but it does mean that we know that overall in the season you do definitely want to mix. So we knew.
Yeah.
When we did this, I don't think Common People, which is like a really bleak episode, was not written at the point that we did this. I think I just thought, it was also such an irresistible idea. And in terms of analogues for other episodes, we did an episode, The Entire History of You, in the first series, and Be Right Back in the second series. And it's kind of a companion piece to those. They're all sort of meditations on memory and grief. And it's weird. It's a bit like being in a band and going, this is an acoustic number. And now this is an electro pop.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to make a mix of those. And also, sometimes you're like, well, we know we're going to spend. Like, we've got a spaceship in one, and that's going to cost us this much. Although to start with this, I was like, well, so let's do it sort of, there'll be a contained piece, and it's like, and then you're like, there's a lot of
people.
There's a lot of VFX involved in this.
Yeah, it's true. It was complicated.
A lot of things to do. So but that's the extent of the sort of pre-planning. That goes on in my head.
I wanted to ask about the end when we get to the actual eulogy, which is I don't think there's any dialogue in that sequence. And we see the people sitting in the church or the pews with the device on their temples, but we don't see what they're seeing. We don't see if there's like a projection or like what the actual product that's being made from all of this is. Like,
what is it?
Yeah, it feels great that mystery is there, but I wonder how that landed as being what it should be.
I think the conversation with Ella, one of the things I mentioned was I'd had to come up with during the pandemic, somebody I knew had passed away, and there was going to be an online memorial for them, and I was asked to contribute like some memory, like, because it's just like an anecdote about this person. And so you'd do that. I recorded something and it was uploaded to this thing, which you could sort of then browse through, this kind of multimedia presentation of fragments of the memories of this person's life. And so the idea was definitely that there'll be some memory that you see. Now, I think, again, we don't say this in the script,
which
actually.
I like that you don't really. It's mysterious.
Because we did discuss, should you see it? Should you go through and there's like people there, like they're sort of like, waving at Carol virtually. I kind of think that the moment he has, because the guide is constantly saying to him, would you like to curate this? Would you like me to upload this moment?
Yeah.
Would you like me to? And we don't actually say, but I think the moment he uploads is the moment where he's standing in the doorway watching her play the cello, which feels like the most real.
The actual her.
Yes. Yeah, and it was always, there was never any dialogue in the script. It's quite specific about. I think it actually would just follow exactly what it says in the script. That it cuts in between the. music, which we didn't know what the piece of music was going to be at the time.
Oh, that's gorgeous. I assume it is actually original.
Yeah, original piece of music.
Yeah.
Do they have Emmys for that? For the original composition?
It's an amazing piece of music.
Because I think it's a great.
It really is.
It's a tearjerker, and we've had lots of people requesting it. You can find it on your streaming services.
It's wonderful.
So yeah, so you don't. So I assume what they're seeing, the people in the church, is they're experiencing some kind of compilation,
multimedia,
while
a montage.
While Carol's daughter plays
playing
the piece that he found.
Right.
That's the other key piece.
That's interesting too.
Again, we don't actually spell it out for you, but it's the piece of music he found, because she doesn't know. She says it was a piece she composed.
Yes.
Oh, so
no,
she
doesn't
learned
know.
it because
she knows
found
it because it's one of the things I find. It's the important memory that I find.
Yeah, and then she's playing it herself.
There's an interesting moment I'm going to ask in the end when she sort of we lock eyes. Carol
I wanted to ask about this too.
Or the daughter and I, and there's a kind of moment of recognition, and I always think this is so interesting. She now knows me because she's seen me go through that.
No, you see, no, she hasn't. She hasn't. She
hasn't reviewed the whole thing or something.
Again, we don't.
I love it that it's kind of ambiguous and mysterious.
Totally. We never
You're like, how much
specify.
is she aware of what happened and isn't?
What she knows is, what I think is she knows that, this guy was reluctant, but he found this beautiful memory. Oh, and he wasn't going to come. It's partly that, and there he has arrived. He's kind of the last one there, but he's just a sort of surprise arrival when she looks up and clocks you and sort of does a gentle sort of recognition, nod of recognition. And
I don't need that.
And is kind of thanking you.
Yeah.
She's thanking you for the sort of beautiful piece of music.
Yeah.
But it raises to me the thing I think we think about with AI and people using like AI chatbots to do their homework for them. Like if you're outsourcing this part of your brain to this little AI thing, like you didn't actually experience it. So like she sort of knows, but she didn't experience the same thing. And it feels really reflective of how the real AI has come up for us, and what you lose when you let the robot take it over.
But a lot of people are using it for therapy, aren't they?
That's what I've heard. I've heard the same thing, that people are actually using the ChatGPT for a therapeutic, actual therapy.
Like
which
a
is really
24-hour therapist who won't go, well, that's it. Off you go. You're on your own for a week. Thanks. Deal with it yourself. You sit quietly with yourself for a week, mate.
See you next week. It's definitely, it's really, really eerie. I have not used it yet. I have not actually
Any
engaged
kind of chatbot,
with it.
anything?
Nothing really. No, I have not actually engaged with it.
I've toyed around with them.
Yeah, I bet you have.
And it's a scary, obviously it's a scary threat if you're a writer. It's like, I don't know what I think about this thing. But I can see its value as a tool for a human, as in the same way that the tools in Photoshop. I don't get incensed about those, like people using but the worry is that. But then the tools in Photoshop presumably are putting loads of people out of work.
Absolutely.
So that's the.
For those folks, that's as upsetting and strange.
Yeah.
Like if you asked a chatbot to write a Black Mirror script, it might be able to get something that felt like Black Mirror, but only because you invented what Black Mirror is. Like it wouldn't know it on its own, and that's the interesting.
You haven't done that, have you? No. Just as an experiment, it'd be super interesting.
The first thing I did, when we did, it was like just after, literally about a week after we wrapped season 6, we did this episode, Joan is Awful, and just after we'd wrapped that, ChatGPT launches, and the first thing I did was write me a script, but tell me go on, then give me a Black Mirror idea, and it comes out with something, and you see it writing it in sentence by sentence, and I got a cold, what I call the cold egg of doom that gets cracked. I feel like
slowly running down your scalp,
cracked on your whoa, as I thought, oh my God, I'm doomed, because it looks plausible when it's coming in, and then actually when I actually sort of read what it's coming up with, you're like, oh, this feels really derivative of, because
that's what it is.
It is what it is.
Because it's the mechanically reclaimed meat of the bits of flesh blasted off the bones of other people, I guess in that case, my own endeavours being fed back to me. And I'm sure I've heard worse pitches.
Interesting.
But it wasn't still something that you'd
something
actually...
about it lacked.
go for. Yeah, because it is trying to sound like a Black Mirror idea rather than it's actually.
That there still is something that's not quite right.
Yeah.
Yet. They haven't
They
cracked
might
something.
iron that out.
I would think they will at some point.
You just don't know, and then
But they can't make something new. Like no one can invent a new Black Mirror with an AI because it has to have existed beforehand.
I've
That's
got a vested interest in everyone continuing to believe that. But
I was going to say, you keep telling yourself that. I'm not so sure.
I do think I think that people will always want a human in the because all creative stuff is a human trying to communicate with a human, right? And so that's why I kind of think you're going to want to feel that there's a messy human involved in that process. Otherwise,
we're going to want to feel that there's a human being there. I suppose so. Yeah.
That does it for today's episode. We'll be back with a regular Tuesday dispatch as Emmy season rolls on. This podcast is edited by Brett Fuchs and produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Subscribe to the Prestige Junkie newsletter at theankler.com or to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, where again, there's a video version of this conversation, or wherever you get your podcasts. We will see you on Tuesday.